Birthdays are supposed to be filled with love, celebration, and the warmth of family. They're the days when you expect laughter, a cake glowing with candles, and maybe even a few thoughtful gifts. But imagine, instead of hugs or well wishes, you're met with something cold and heartless, a command to pack your things and leave. No chance to explain, no arguments entertained, just get out on the very day you were born. That's where this story begins, a shocking act of cruelty that sparked a silent form of revenge. No shouting, no chaos, just bank statements speaking louder than words. Growing up in my family was never picture perfect, but like most kids, I still held on to the idea that birthdays carried some kind of magic, at the very least, a moment where I might feel seen or appreciated. That illusion shattered the year I came home expecting a quiet dinner, maybe even a small celebration, only to be blindsided by my parents with something far different. Instead of cake or laughter, I was told to pack my things. According to them, I was old enough to stand on my own and had become nothing more than a burden to the household. The sting cut even deeper because it wasn't just any day, it was my birthday, the very day that should have represented family, love, and belonging. To make matters worse, I knew in my heart that if it had been my sibling, the golden child of the family, they would have never faced this kind of cruelty. Standing there, numb and unable to process the betrayal, I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I didn't fight. I simply walked away, carrying nothing but shock, disbelief, and the hollow ache of being cast out by the very people who were supposed to protect me. After leaving my parents' house with nothing but a duffel bag, I found myself crashing on a friend's couch for a while. It wasn't glamorous, and it definitely wasn't comfortable, but at least it was a roof over my head. Eventually, I managed to scrape together enough for a tiny rented room, barely big enough for a bed and a desk. The first few weeks were the hardest. I struggled with expenses, worried about rent, and had moments where I wondered if maybe my parents had been right about me being a burden. But instead of letting that spiral into defeat, I made a choice. I picked up more work hours wherever I could, took on side hustles, and became meticulous with every dollar I earned. Eating cheap, avoiding luxuries, and quietly saving became my new routine. All the while, my parents never called. No apology, no checking in, not even the smallest concern for how I was surviving. Their silence could have crushed me, but instead, it fueled me. I channeled all that hurt into discipline, opening my first savings account, then slowly building up investments. With every small milestone, I felt stronger. I never boasted, never made noise about my progress, because my silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. While I was quietly rebuilding my life, my parents were busy spinning their own story. In their minds, I had to be struggling without their support, probably broke, desperate, and maybe even begging others for help. They told anyone who would listen that kicking me out had been the tough love I needed, bragging about how they were teaching me a valuable lesson in independence. Family, friends, and relatives picked up on their version of events, whispering behind my back that I must have failed, that I couldn't possibly manage on my own. What they didn't realize was how far from the truth they really were. They saw me as the child who could never make it without them, clinging to their own sense of self-importance as if their rejection had been some noble act of parenting. In reality, I was slowly carving out stability they couldn't imagine. They had no clue about the job I had secured, the savings I was building, or the investments that were quietly stacking in my favor. Their arrogance and assumptions only fueled the suspense, because the truth was growing quietly in the background, waiting for the perfect moment to shatter their smug little bubble. It all shifted the day my parents suddenly found themselves in trouble. Years of careless spending and mounting debt had finally caught up with them. Mortgage payments were slipping, medical bills were piling, and the stability they had always flaunted was beginning to crack. Reluctantly, they reached out to me. The tone of their call was strained, almost forced, as if asking for help from the very child they had thrown out was beneath them. Still, I agreed to meet, calm and polite, hiding any hint of the storm brewing inside me. When I walked in, their attitude carried the same arrogance as before. They seemed certain I was living a weak, fragile existence, desperate for their approval. They believed I'd be flattered to even sit at their table again. But the reality was far from their imagination. Without anger or a raised voice, I slid a stack of papers across the table, my bank statements. Line after line showed not only steady income but healthy savings and growing investments. Nestled within the paperwork was proof of something even greater, ownership of my own car, and even a modest property under my name. The silence that followed was deafening. Their smug expressions dissolved into pure shock as the weight of the truth sank in. The child they had cast out as a burden was not only surviving, he was thriving. At that moment, the balance of power shifted completely, and they knew it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw their cruelty back in their faces. Instead, I sat there in calm silence, watching as they struggled to process the numbers staring up at them from the bank statements. When I finally spoke, my words were simple, almost quiet. I didn't need your help after all, I said evenly. The day you kicked me out, I stopped depending on you. That was it, no dramatic speech, no long list of grievances, just the truth they had chosen to ignore. My parents scrambled, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. They tried to excuse themselves, saying they only wanted what was best for me, that they had acted out of love, or worse, that I had misunderstood their intentions. At one point, they even tried to guilt-trip me, reminding me that they had given me a roof for years and that I owed them loyalty. But I didn't bite. I didn't need to. My actions had already spoken louder than anything I could ever say. The real revenge was never about humiliating them, it was about proving, without doubt, that I was more than what they believed. My independence was the answer, and their regret was my victory. Looking back, being kicked out on my birthday was one of the most brutal experiences of my life, but it also became the very push I needed to grow stronger. At the time, it felt like rejection, abandonment, and betrayal rolled into one. Yet, in the silence that followed, I found clarity. I realized that shouting, arguing, or begging for acceptance would have only wasted energy. Instead, I focused on building a life of my own. Every hour of work, every dollar saved, and every choice to keep going turned into my quiet rebellion. What started as survival became success, and that success became the ultimate revenge. I didn't need to tear them down, I only needed to rise on my own. If there's one lesson in this, it's that quiet people should never be underestimated. Sometimes the strongest response is patience, discipline, and undeniable proof. Let your actions speak, because when they do, they'll echo louder than any argument ever could. Some betrayals cut deeper than words can describe, especially when they come from the very people meant to love you unconditionally. But revenge doesn't always need fire, shouting, or chaos to be satisfying. Sometimes, it's as simple as living well and letting the numbers quietly tell the story. The parents may never fully admit their mistake, but the undeniable proof lives in black and white on those bank statements. And for the narrator, that truth was far more powerful than any argument. In the end, the greatest revenge was silence, because silence carried the truth they could never deny.